will certainly allow some good time for questions as well. I can't move too far because I've got this clicked here for the video, so I won't strut around too much. Here's just a brief introduction. Twitter handle, if any of you are tweeting, along with the the event hashtag for today. I wear different hats, well pronounced. Zoodikers is a content marketing agency, and I've been in marketing for 28 years. And that's led to all sorts of TED Talks and things like that. Probably more relevant because there are lots of marketeers, obviously, that are on the bandwagon of AI and change management and digital disruption, rightly so, given what they do. But I also have a company which I co-founded with two other experts 3 years ago, called AI in FM, Artificial Intelligence in a sector called Facilities Management. So we are, getting our hands dirty with IBM Watson and developing product and being paid to advise and write white papers and so on. So that's that hat, and then another working with a number of authors as part of Digital Leadership Associates. I'm 50, I turned 50 in January, and we hear so much focus around millennials, and I'm firmly of the belief that with the right training, with the right mindset, people like my age, often I call him Mr. Pale, Male, Stale. He's typically at the helm of a lot of the industry sectors that are really important in every walk of life. And with the right mindset, with the right training, the ability to attract the right kind of talent, people like us, as well as the millennials, working together really is a very powerful cocktail. So I don't think people should be put off this new world feeling that it's the domain of their teenage kids or their nieces and nephews. It goes without saying that we are in a really changing world. Getting used to change. Will from the BBC talked about it previously. Being prepared for that, constantly thinking ahead, to what that will look like is absolutely essential for our survival, really. And we know why. We know we are talking here about smartphone-enabled generations and smartphone-enabled business-to-business and business-to-consumer buyers, who really have put the power outside the hands of the brands. So as an organisation, whether you are a university, whether you are a borough council, whether you're a retailer, whatever kind of organisation you are, you've lost the power, because as consumers, whether you're B2B or B2C, we're able to do that research, we're able to check out Glassdoor to find out what kind of an employer you are, we're able to do research, we're able to check out reviews. So the level of transparency, for someone that's been in PR for 28 years and the old years of pulling the wool over people's eyes and all of that kind of spin, think back to Tony Blair, those years, that's gone. We can't operate like that anymore. So that's what's really driven it. And we look here alongside the current, back to January of this year, the population of the UK compared to almost on a par with how many internet users we actually have, and how many mobile subscriptions, which is actually more than we have actual numbers of people in the UK. So this is what's fueled this huge change. And looking back to that previous presentation, if some of you were in the room for that, we are having to really re-educate ourselves and put ourselves into the right mindset, close the skills gap, or else if we look at our salespeople today, both in B2C and B2B, they will be obsolete. The death of the salesman that was mentioned there, I've used that in the past on presentations. We really do need to change not just the way we as individuals operate, but structures. So I think massive change, and it's very, very uncomfortable for a lot of organisations across every industry sector, is having to rethink the structure of our organisations. So here is the old school ivory tower, the C-suite up in the ivory tower. The business silos, they still exist. Sales not talking to marketing, not talking to customer service, not talking to HR. We really do need, and this was an infographic we pulled together last year, that is us all gathered round the big data, not just being swamped by it, but making informed decisions with the right kind of data. And that's data around our sales, our marketing, our HR. And that requires a level of collaboration that, again, is uncomfortable for a lot of CEOs, to actually gather together. And that requires perhaps a different sort of impact when you look at P&Ls of different departments and so on. So it is a world that is demanding us to operate very, very differently. Show of hands, who's been to the Science Museum, to the robot exhibition? You must go, the rest of you, it's fantastic. I went about a month ago, so these are my pictures from the museum. Absolutely fantastic. So you've all been hearing, we've heard a few presentations today about it, every day on the BBC, on Forbes, on World Economic Forum. These are really important sources for you to kind of keep up to date with this change. And I just do Google News and every day check out what's happening in AI. But we're looking at a fourth industrial revolution. After we've had steam and electrification and computing, we now have cyber, AI, Internet of Things. That's really the world that we're operating in, and this new wave of technology that's driving everything we do. I felt it was quite pertinent given where we are today. This was in the news about 3 or 4 days ago, and it's a piece of research by Yale and Oxford University saying that AI is going to be better than human workers at all tasks in less than 50 years. And there's a couple of extra bits to that. So we're not just talking of blue-collar manual workers, better than a surgeon by 2053. Someone who works in retail, AI will be better than that in 2031. And someone who can write a best-selling book by 2049. So move aside all of the authors that really are often at many of these presentations. It's powerful and it's scary at the same time. And so I would just encourage you all to kind of keep constantly innovating. Deloitte talks here in this piece of research that they carried out recently in their human capital trends about many leaders being unprepared. And from my work in consulting, in training, I've worked with Arsenal Football Club, which was tough as a Spurs fan. I've worked with major brands across every industry sector and individual leaders, the CEOs, through to owner-managers of small businesses where I live in Kent. And people are grappling with it. Unprepared for it, and yet in their organisations, of the leaders that responded, 42% have actually saying that it's in operation in many of their organisations, yet they feel really unprepared. And for me, that equates to jumping on the bandwagon. Just like a few years ago, you would have the CEO of a company not having a clue about social media, yet you'd have a marketing department that was winning awards for all of its fantastic digital activity. And I think that's what's happening today. People are paying lip service, people are throwing money at developing apps for it, but haven't got their strategy together and don't understand it, particularly as a board of that company. So again, I could spend the next 6-7 slides giving you the predictions, giving you the backup. We're not just talking about hype. It's not just Stephen Hawking talking about, we've got 100 years to colonise a different planet. This is real. It's here today, and it's certainly going to radically change the way we live and work in the next few years, certainly the next decade, and in particular in the next 50 years. I think by 50 years down the line, we'll see robots with what they're calling augmented general intelligence, where they pretty much have the cognitive ability, of us humans, which is scary if you consider it on the one hand, but also very exciting. And I was at the speakers' dinner yesterday evening here, and we got into a discussion. It was nearly 11 o'clock, so 11 p.m. So maybe forgive us after a few glasses of wine. But I wonder perhaps if, and Elon Musk mentioned this a while back, if they are potentially part of our evolution. So I'll throw that out there for you to go away and think about on your own. But the government, the UK government, is investing a lot of money in it. You can see, just how many organisations and individual business people are taking it seriously. You've got James Dyson here, putting his own money, £2.5 billion of investment into it, basically hoping to propel his business forward into this new wave of technology, and certainly hoping to make his company and Britain, successful in a post-Brexit era. Whereas a lot of the time, at the moment when you Google images of AI, it's all hotels in Japan that are all run by robots and all sorts of things happening in China. We need it to happen in the UK and Europe, and closer to home. So I'm talking as if it's tomorrow, but the fact is, here it is today, in your Nest, in your Hive, in Siri, in Alexa, when, for example, Netflix suggests, perhaps if you like Tom Hardy, you should watch this drama, etc. All of this is already AI embedded into many of the devices, the apps that we already use, without us even realising, that it is AI. And then we're all aware of Elon Musk and the self-driving cars and so on. So it's here today, and obviously it's coming further down the line. So I think the next big trend, we're already seeing it with, Pizza Express. You're seeing it when you're on the phone, when you're online with some of the banks that you interact with, is the chatbot. So from a marketing perspective, from a customer service perspective, this is one of the major changes. And, are we, I'm looking around the room here, there's quite a lot of people, sort of 30s, 40s, 50s, not really many millennials, but they are really comfortable, with interacting with chatbots. And I think the irony from the research that I've been reading is that people actually feel that the robotic aspects of AI are offering a better human touch and a better customer service level than previous. And I think that's quite powerful, and that's probably why they really are taking off at the moment. So in retail, again, trying to sort of touch a few industry sectors as well as a few business functions as well. So in retail, 45% saying they will begin to use AI over the coming years. So it could be helping them look at who's coming into the store, who's browsing online, what the kind of weather is, to actually then change the analytics and make predictions and offer different incentives, different pricing and so on. So that level of tailoring and personalisation is using big data, in real time in order to provide the right level of customer service to get the sale. In financial services, you've got Accenture here talking, about it being, with AI, one of the main ways that we will interact with our banks over the next 3 years. So you've got RBS, have done a lot of work with the banks like RBS, NatWest and others over the last year or so, training their relationship managers, helping them use social media platforms, helping them think about talent acquisition and so on. But this next wave is them using AI, for all these different things here. And there's the point, I was just making a moment ago, and you've got Accenture talking about it here. The paradox being it will lead to banking being much more automated, and give that impression of personalisation, even though in fact it's being done by a robot. So if we look at procurement, much of the talk at the moment is replacing, and I think it's more accurate to talk about augmenting. So I quoted at the beginning there, the surgeon, the barrister, the procurement manager, the HR manager. I think they will have at their disposal, if they're smart, they get trained, have investment in the right kind of tools and technologies, the kind of data, the kind of information through an app, maybe through a robot, through a hologram, however it's fed to them, to aid their decision making. And it might actually be a better world, it might be a more interesting job that we have. But certainly, we're talking here about predictive algorithms and the ability, to actually allow that real-time monitoring of all different suppliers. So I think for procurement, it's going to be a really interesting space to get involved in. And then we're not just talking about, we're talking about AI and Internet of Things, 3D printing. These all fall into that definition of this fourth industrial revolution, of all these different technologies that really are, reshaping the way that we actually do business. So anything a company can print by themselves on a 3D printer won't need to be externally sourced. And you've got restaurants that are doing 3D printed food. You've got 3D printing happening in the medical world with spines and parts of the bodies. It's just mind-blowing, how technology is advancing and how it's reshaping. And we all worry about tomorrow's robot. If you think of prosthetic limbs and pacemakers and all of the other pieces of technology in medicine that we've used in recent years and we're still going to be using in the future, we almost are becoming part robotic. So sales and marketing, this is the sweet spot really, isn't it? And we've heard quite a bit about it in other presentations through today. But I've talked about customer service. I see a kind of real merger of roles. So particularly the role of sales and marketing and HR. I hate the term smarketing, but I do see how technology is changing and blurring those functions. We want those functions to be, delineated in the way they are currently, but actually if we look ahead as organisations, if we're needing to use social platforms and technology to retain our staff, to attract the best data scientists, to get the right customer data to use for customer service, then actually that might be the domain of the marketeer combined with HR. And that marketeer will be making decisions and investments that typically procurement and tech or CIO, CTO have typically made. So we really are seeing a blurring of those lines. And even if we keep those functions separate, what it absolutely requires is for the board of the company to collaborate much, much more. And therefore the CEO and the other board members to all understand each other's business functions in a much better way than they traditionally have done. So here, main benefits anticipated from AI in marketing, insight on accounts, more detailed analysis of campaigns, and identifying prospective customers. And that's as much the domain of sales as it is of marketing. If we look at it from the point of view of HR, I've touched upon this briefly already. So a survey here that IBM carried out, 10 key views that have come up here. So automating screening, reducing bias. We're naturally, as human beings, we have a bias, whether that's gender or race. And there's some really interesting articles online about your name and how that can impact, how difficult it can be to get a job. So AI can actually reduce that, maybe make you a better, safer employer from the point of view of employment law. Reducing errors, improving compliance, I'm just going to pick off a few of these. Streamlining onboarding, the handbook, the training, the investment in people that can actually be automated and played out and so on. So many, many different ways. Maybe the bottom one could be the key that keeps us all in employment. AI actually showing the value of the human touch. So where people will increasingly be working with machines and apps and holograms and robots and drones and so on, and that number crunching, data analysis and maybe the less important aspects of that, then the real value of the surgeon to analyse it, or the real value of that barrister or that marketeer or that salesperson will come to the fore. So I actually see quite a positive take on what that might look like. So I've touched upon a couple of these already, but how can you prepare? I think it's an overwhelming time to be at the helm of an organisation, whether you're in procurement or HR or any of those functions. So how can you actually prepare? I think, again, depending on your age or irrespective of your age, you need a mindset that allows for and encourages and sees the value of this change. So I think the next one is fundamental because, as I say, everyone's out there jumping on the bandwagon, getting involved. I work in some industry sectors like property, real estate, construction, where margins are really, really tight. And if they don't take advice of number two and have clarity of their exit strategy, I was talking to a couple of people earlier and they're in companies that are funded by private equity, they've got to make their numbers. They can't afford just to throw money at all this technology without a clear plan. So they need their clear mid and long-term business plans. They need to control their own agenda whilst also dipping a toe and finding out what their industry sector's main drivers are, what competition's doing, how much they can survive, whether they're going to be an innovator, whether they're going to be a laggard. It's really important to do all of that research. Training is fundamental. Training to close the skills gap, training HR so that they can then go and find the right people, whether they're data scientists or the right kind of salespeople or the right marketeers. So then that leads to using social platforms to hire and attract the right kind of people. Social selling, we talked about that in the previous presentation. not just being brilliant at using all these different, whether it's Snapchat or Instagram, and doing brilliant, creative, award-winning work for marketing, but using them fundamentally for all these other business functions as well. Finding out what funding is available to you. Maybe you need to partner, maybe you can get the funding from places like Innovate or do some sort of crowdfunding as well. Evaluation, depending on what number 2 is, what is your goal? How are you going to measure success and have steps along the way to actually get you there? And staying safe, staying compliant, staying safe, and that's a real interest I have as well. If we've got time, we'll talk about it briefly at the end. So that's my kind of feel and take and few nuggets of wisdom about AI today, where AI is heading, some sources of information, and maybe an action plan. I just need to spend 5 minutes talking about this because I find many, and I work with brands, major brands as well as lots of startups. Many of them don't even get this. Many of them haven't evolved into companies that are social businesses. So I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes, and it is relevant, and AI does play a role in this. So evolving into being a business that uses all these social channels and all this technology to achieve the right kind of business goals is absolutely fundamental. So I have what I call my 6-point plan, and 1 is planning and segmenting your audience. 2 is finding the right channel, the relevant channel, where are they active. 3 is coming up with the right strategy for social. 4 is actually building the profile and differentiating, and that can be done by HR for talent acquisition. It can be done by, obviously, salespeople for new business development, cross-selling, upselling, and of course by marketing and other departments. And realising that in a world where we can no longer cold call alone, solely, we need to nurture, we need to invest time, we need to build relationships, and most importantly, we may have all this incredible activity and content and fantastic, infographics and listicles and all the great things that we talked about earlier when we heard about segmentation analysis. But if we don't, somewhere along the line, have that old school call to action, whether that is the e-shot or the follow-up phone call, or we invite them to the golf or to the coffee or to the lunch or whatever it might be, all that content is going to be wasted because we haven't gone in for the kill. We haven't kind of exploited the thought leadership actually for sales purposes as well. Haven't got time to go into all of them, so I just picked off 2. So number 1 is that marketing segmentation. And a few hours ago we heard a bit about this from another speaker. But my take on it is it needs to have a clear business goal. So it needs to be, where are we looking to get our exit on the stock exchange? So I've prepared 2-year programs for clients where they've, after an 18-month stroke 2-year program, they've listed on the stock exchange. But it's been about influence, it's been about warming up the investor community, it's been about being seen in certain platforms, getting editorial in the right kind of places. So it has a plan, has business objectives. So where are people active really is that final column. Once you've identified who buys from you, who can you keep cross-selling to, who are the influencers in that sale, then you're really thinking about how are those people influenced? What do they read? What do they buy? Which chat rooms? Which social platforms? And that really is one of the key. So here, you fill this in, you understand dynamically with your sales. It could be about HR as well. It could be about attracting those data scientists so that you can invest in AI, or AR, augmented reality as well. So in terms of the positives, hopefully I've given quite a positive spin to this because I genuinely am very positive about it. So this is an infographic pulled together to look at the big business challenges that AI could solve. And down the bottom here, so we're talking about weak productivity, slow growth, aging workforces. You're seeing AI embedded tools that are being used in dementia care, for example, as well as in many, many other medical environments. And I think that could be a way to really help, the huge proliferation of Alzheimer's patients and the demographics that we've got certainly in Western Europe. So as I mentioned earlier, I think it's going to be very much AI doing the grunt work. That doesn't mean necessarily blue collar work. It could be the grunt work that a surgeon, that a barrister, that a retailer, that a marketeer has to do in their job. Now, some of you might like that grunt work. You might think, I don't really want to lose that. But I see much of that kind of work being done by machines, in the future, which could free us up to do more exciting things. And in China, for example, I saw a BBC Panorama programme about this a few months back, but you've got a burgeoning leisure industry forming, and you've got people that used to work in the factories now learning golf and then learning to teach golf to new Chinese business people in this burgeoning leisure and tourism industry. So I touched upon Stephen Hawking, the eminent physicist and scientist. There's a lot of things that are being said about what AI will mean for our planet. Now, I spoke about this a couple of years ago when I talked about space needing to expedite space exploration, because otherwise we're going to have to move to another planet. And Stephen Hawking said this, just a few months ago, that we will need to colonize another planet in 100 years. Who knows, maybe in 100 years we will be merged and we will be more cyborg-like. I really don't know. I wish I could predict, the future like that. But, I'm optimistic. One of the areas I'm particularly interested in is needing to program the ethics into AI. If you think of what's been happening in Manchester and London, think of wars that have happened for the millennia across, we are all extremely nationalistic. We protect our countries, our borders, and I think the world, AI is will force us to consider a future world where we are much more global, where we operate much more like multinational corporations, and maybe that will change the face of economics and politics, and that our countries in the future, or our geographies and territories, will be run much more like those kinds of multinational corporations, with a mix of academics, business people, consumers, and old school politicians on our so-called board. And I'm hopeful that that will happen, because I think more work needs to be done, and you've got people like the Institute of Future, doing work into ethics. But I think that's the big thing. Quickly, we all need to have our voice heard over social media, over traditional methods, to ensure that in our countries, in our environments, in our towns, we are having a say on what the future and the ethics of AI are, because otherwise it will get out of hand. But apart from that, I'm very positive, and I'd like to finish there and invite any questions that anyone may have. Thank you very much.